what's up. I'm Unknown Shadow, this is Albert, and this is Colorado, and it's been a while. Yeah. This week I wanted to touch on just a couple of different changes that I made to the bike. Early on, I think it was even one of the first upgrades that I ever did, was to replace the standard stock intake, an entire air box, with a man-in-the-box MTake. So just a nice side pipe, a little bracket that went up into the frame, and a way to kind of mount that pipe and it went off to the side a little bit. I had no problems with it. It actually seemed quite good. But it's always kind of made me wonder about other options, because, you know, I made that choice really early on. One of the options that I'd seen was the Chimera Intake. The short ram, black, looked really nice, and I will admit that I like it. I liked the look more than anything else, and kind of wondered, does it perform the same, different, you know, at least as good as the MTake? So that Chimera is more of a straight pipe, and instead of like looping sideways across the front of the bike and putting the air filter on the side, that actually opened up some of that room right underneath, or right in the middle, slash like right above the engine there. Taking the airbox and that frame away, you know, kind of gave me some options there that I wondered about. Over the course of time, I put on an oil cooler and a few other pieces, and choices had to be made based on where that air pipe was at. One of the mounting options that come with the oil cooler is actually to use the frame, but I had the air intake mounted there. It did make me wonder, could I kind of move the oil cooler up, move the fender back down, like all sorts of options with that. So then I started rearranging things, which is always the way everything goes, I think. So the first thing that I did was I took the fender off, because I had moved it up, kind of get it out of the way, get it closer to make it a little more dirt bike looking. So I wanted to be able to tell whether or not moving the air cooler up was gonna run into, you know, either stock or even the high lifted fender. Would having that oil cooler up above run into that fender? And yes. If you use the same back mounts of the oil cooler, it pushes it just far enough forward that it runs into the fender. And if you kind of reverse it a little bit, it gets it out of the way of the fender, but it gets it right in the way of the air filter. So that option was a no-go. I had to move it back down, move it back onto the tappet cover, and now it's kind of back in place where it was. I also moved the fender back down to the kind of the stock position. No particular reason except that it looks better down there, and I can kind of remount where the brake line is and kind of cinch it back into place and kind of hold it there. Nothing very specific about that. It was just kind of everything was off, so let's make it look slightly different again. I think one of the reasons that I kind of went that way in the first place was when I went to the knobbier tires, I think in my head I had this idea that like they were going to be knobby and big, and it turned out that the diameter of the knobbier tires is actually smaller than stock, so it decreased it a little bit, and then it increased the amount of space between the fender and the tire. It didn't particularly look silly, it just, I don't know. There was no reason. So with the oil cooler and everything back and the fender back in place, then I went ahead and put the air intake back on. This time the Chimera. And really there's a lot of kind of parts of the Chimera that are just a little bit better. The crankcase breather actually connects to the Chimera, which means that it's actually feeding some of that back into the intake and allowing it to burn off, versus just being an external filter on that. You know, emissions wise or environment wise, probably a little bit better. The air sensor actually mounts into the pipe versus kind of near the pipe that was on the MTake. And all in all, you know, it feels a little more finished. Plus, I like that it's moving, like that it looks more forward that's more of a stylish. It might be more like better overall just because now it's in the path of the air and the air's pushing at it straight at the cone, at the filter. You know, that'll take some time to figure out whether or not that's true. This is using a more, it seems like more of a normal diameter filter, so maybe that'll even be easier to find. I went with the SF filter namely because, you know, it looks a little bit better. The cone style filters I could only find in chrome, at least when I was buying it, and the SF filter, I think it's an SF filter, came in a black, and so it just looked nicer. This one is at least less maintenance overall because it doesn't require oiling and all that jazz, so that's a little bit nicer as well. It is a much bigger filter than what was on the MTake. I could probably find some slightly smaller filters, and in fact I'm contemplating looking for some just because I couldn't move the oil cooler up because it ran into the air filter if I mounted it in reverse to keep it away from the fender. With the Chimera, you have two options for mounting it. One is actually to move it kind of under the tank, and one is to move it more parallel to the tank. I couldn't really get it to fit with the filter and everything that I was trying to do under the tank. Maybe since I took the oil cooler and moved it back down, I could actually make it fit that way. But I wanted it more kind of straight and external just for the looks of it. The only thing there is to make sure that the filter isn't kind of bumping into the fuel tank and everything else. And that just required kind of turning it a little bit and just to keep it out of the way. But overall, nothing major. Riding around for a little bit though, you know, it's hard to say whether or not it's making much of a difference than the MTake. I mean, both of them are just, it's such a small engine, so just getting more air in general just helps. The bike seems snappier, but that could also just be because I'm cold. It looks nice though. And it's, I mean, solid. Really, that's all I got this week. You know, I just wanted to kind of do that comparison, kind of move things around, try out the Chimera Intake, see how it looks, see how it feels. Right now it feels great, but it's hard to tell really the difference just because, you know, without kind of doing a dyno run, you know, it's going to take a little bit and it's going to take putting a few more miles on it. I will say if you're kind of going between the two and you're trying to make a decision, I'd probably get the Chimera Intake just because it tends to look more finished than the MTake ever did. Everything actually has a place. You do have to cut that crankcase breather tube, which maybe you don't necessarily want to, but it will need to be trimmed just to kind of get it out of the way of the actual exhaust and then onto the intake. But overall, the fit and finish of the Chimera just looks a lot better. With the end of 2020 finally here and past, I'm going to try to do a review video of everything else that I've done over this last year to the bike. I do have some other projects coming up that I have for the bike as well, so expect those to be coming out hopefully soon. Hopefully you found something in this video that you liked. If you did, you know, like, comment, subscribe, do those things if you like to do those things. Hopefully you're having a good year, a good new year, and all that kind of stuff. You know, in the meantime, hopefully you're having at least a good day. Thanks for watching. Bye. It's too cold. This was a stupid idea. Should have done this earlier.